It's over, man. One Punch Man is finally over. Episode 12 is out, and holy crap, what a way to go. This finale, it was freaking amazing. I was so engaged throughout the entire episode, so much hype, but it definitely hurts to see probably my favorite show of the season, to be over with. I will definitely miss One Punch Man. Obviously, I will, watch the OVAs and that special Road to Hero, I believe it's called. I will definitely, watch that when it come out, and maybe I'll review it. I'm not really sure. I might not. I might do it. I'm not really sure. I'm still considering it. But this episode, like we all know, the focus would be mainly between, Boros and Saitama, because of course, it ended last week where we got that cliffhanger of Boros, showing off his true power now that the armor, that actually took the power was now broken. But we see now that, Saitama, he was like already, kind of serious, when Boros was like, attacking him, because we see that, Saitama, he did not have that comical look to him. He actually looked like a real hero. And we see now that like Boros, he was like definitely no joke, even though Saitama was like keeping up with him and blocking his hits, and Saitama did get a good one where he actually punched off his arm. That right there was like awesome. But now going back outside where we have our S rank heroes going against the golem, as I call him, we see now that oh no! First we had the Tank Top Master. Like he was saying that there was no way he can leave. Breaking down this ship. To a tornado, and we see now that like he had his own way for fighting enemies that were like in the air. And so out of nowhere we see like his energy appear around his hand, and then we see him now picking up this like massive piece of debris, and we see him now throwing it like to the ship. And obviously, Tornado definitely had to outdo him, where she used her powers to lift multiple pieces, and we even have the Tank Top Master on one of them. And so when he realized, what she was doing, he actually gave up, and that right there was hilarious. So now it kind of seems like all of the Tank Top heroes, like right now they seem like jokes. Now I will admit that the Tank Top Master, who is obviously above the rest, he can definitely be pretty powerful, but Tornado just looked down on him so much that it definitely made him look, kind of weak. And so now with her still, bombarding a ship with debris, we have all these aliens who definitely, wanted to get out of there. And so right now we see that that the golem, he was like still going against the heroes, and mainly it was like him versus Atomic Samurai, and we see Samurai continuously slicing off pieces of him. And I will say that the animation, for like some of these scenes, mainly between these two, it seemed a bit weaker compared to the rest. I'm not really sure why, but it seems that, for like certain scenes where we see Atomic Samurai, and especially like the Golem guy, they seem slightly downgraded than compared to like how the rest of the series has been. Now, I'm not calling it, flat out bad. I'm definitely not doing that. I'm just saying you can definitely tell that some discussions for them definitely, were a bit downgraded when they got animated. And so now we see that we have Super Fangor Bang. He finally came back, and this guy is ripped. And so now we see that like Bang is actually pretty fine, and like him getting hit actually helped him, because he said that the stiffness from his shoulders was actually gone now. And so we see that when the Golem here actually went to attack Bang, that right there gave Atomic Samurai to actually show off a pretty impressive technique, and that right there was called Atomic Slash, and that right there was amazing. Where we just have all these lines appearing on the screen, and we just see that the Golem guy was like cut into pieces. And so right now, where we have him reforming in like some kind of like more tornado looking thing, we have Bang now stepping in there, and of course now Bang already knew what this guy Flo was. It's where every time he reforms, it's the head that always appear first, and that right there is where the marble is. So all Bang had to do was, while the head was reforming, to like steal that marble and break it, and and that right there was the end, of the golem guy. And so now going back to, Boros and Saitama, we see now that like Boros here, this guy was like definitely no joke. We see that, even though Saitama, wasn't really, attacking except for that one time he actually, like took off his arm. We see Boros just unleash all this power, and we even see him now, sending Saitama flying through like all these pillars, but at the same time, Saitama was definitely, not really getting hurt. And so eventually now Boros here actually, sends him flying, from inside the ship to above. And now that they were like fighting on it, we learn more about, Boros' race, where we learned that his species like pretty much they're like the Mechians, where they can actually regrow limbs, because he has some pretty impressive regenerative abilities. And so right now when he actually grew his arm back, and like he was still going on about how his race or species is like so much superior, eventually Saitama got tired of it. And we see now that when like Boros got enraged, we see him once again, getting more powerful. And we see now that like his skin, even changed colors as it took on like a red, like a white out, like, well, Boros here had like many different forms, I guess you can say, but pretty much they were like many different color palettes, but each one was like stronger than the previous one. I guess you could say that like Boros was like kind of like Frieza in a sense, with like all these forms, and I do use forms with like air quotes. But eventually now with like Boros showing more and more his power, at one point he sent Saitama flying, and we see him now, and we see Saitama go right to the moon. And that right there was like freaking insane. And so we see now that, Boros thought he had won, because this new form he was in, it actually, like takes off years of his lifespan. So of course now he should not really be using it for that long. But when Saitama came back, he was like so shocked. And also, seeing Saitama on the moon, it finally made a lot of sense why we had that like one scene where we see him, jumping in space. That right there makes so much sense. And I'm definitely glad that they, included that in the anime. And so now with Saitama back, we see now that Boros, like, at first he was like very shocked, obviously, but now we see that, he was like, right now, he was like kind of excited, because he feels like Saitama was like making him want to fight all out. He actually didn't care that like he was cutting off years of his lifespan because he was fighting like in this form. And so right now we see that, while they were like still going at it, Saitama here actually, was like able to deal some pretty good blows on him, because at one point he actually punched him in the chest, and that right there made like Boros, go flying. And then we see now, once again, Saitama used those consecutive, normal punches, and that right there like blew him into pieces. And so you would think that right there would be it, but no, you forgot that like Boros. I mean, well, you don't really forget, but like Boros shows off that even this would not be enough to kill him. And we see now that this time when he actually like comes back together, this time he actually unleashes all of his energy now, and we see him like unleashing this like massive blast where it's like pretty much kind of like like Iron Man, unleashing all the energy from his chest. Now I forgot what that was called, but it was like pretty much like that. But this right here was like on a whole like different level, where Boros like planning on getting rid of Saitama and this planet. And so right now this right here was like Boros ultimate technique, and I will say that the animation for this, it was so freaking dynamic. I loved it. But right now we see that like even Saitama was like ready to counter this with his stronger attack as well, and we see now that he called it a final kill, like super serious punch, and that right there split that little beam that Boros shot in half, because we see it that like not only did it not only did it split the beam in half, but we see that like both of them, kind of like alter the clouds, where we have, or like where we have Boros beam, going like two different directions, but you just see like this like massive canyon, and like obviously formed by clouds, thanks to Saitama, and that right there shows, just the huge difference in their power levels, strength wise, obviously. And so even though Boros, looks so messed up, he actually wasn't dead just yet. And we see now that he actually called Saitama out on still having more strength to spare, even after throwing out that one punch. And that right there shows you just how strong he is. And sadly, that right there is where Boros had actually died. And we see now that with him gone, the power core that was holding up the ship, that right there was also gone as well. And so now that the ship was falling, all those heroes, had to escape. And so we have, Bang, Jenna's, Silver Fang, Atomic Samurai, Iron, they were all, running to escape. Oh, and also early on, where we have things under control now, we have Drive Knight, who actually was like going to leave, but we see him now warn Genesis about Metal Knight, saying that, that Metal Knight is Genesis' enemy. So I do wonder if that right there is referring to, the cyborg that Genesis is after. That right there could have been Metal Knight's doing, but that right there also makes you wonder how in the world would Drive Knight even know about that? Is it possible that, that maybe Drive Knight is also after, Metal Knight, or maybe, these two possibly work together at some point? We have no idea, but there are definitely, some reason why Drive Knight would want Genesis, about that. But once all the heroes had escaped, we see now that that I My Mask, he actually appeared out of nowhere, and we see this guy was like furious because all these S-rank heroes were here, and City A was like in such a mess. And so right now he was like asking them, how did this happen? What were you all doing? And we see, I My Mask, he was definitely belittling, all the S ranks. And eventually Metal Bat, because we definitely know this guy is very hot-headed. Both of them were like, going back and forth at one point. And we see now, I My Mask, he was saying that the reason why he does not move up is so that, pissants, don't become S-rank. So pretty much even though this guy, is A-rank, he can definitely beat S-rank easily. And also, and also we see that when this guy was like looking down on the S-rank heroes, getting furious after saying that they did the best they could do, we see his eyes become ready. So I'm not sure if that right there, I'm not sure if that right there was to just show how angry he was, or maybe I My Mask is not really human. We have no idea. But apparently this guy is called the Handsome Common, something like that. But regardless, now we see that while all these heroes were like talking, eventually we see now some kind of like space pod, just like crash down, and we see what it was. It was that Metal Knight who had sent some kind of like android to pretty much go check out the ship. And so right now we have Genesis, calling him out, saying that you did not show up to the meeting. You pretty much did not show up for this fight, but you now want to come when it's over, just so you could get some like alien tech. And that right there was like definitely messed up. And also we see now that like some of the aliens from the ship, they had survived, and we see that that all the S ranks had actually wanted to like question them, but then we have I My Mask come out of nowhere and just get rid of them instantly. And so we learn now that like pretty much I My Mask, he definitely went through something, because Jennifer was saying that these two are very similar. But when I My Mask had left, we have him now talking to Jennifer, saying that that for a while he like had his eyes on him, but ever since the King incident and today, Janice had been nothing but a disappointment, since becoming an S rank. And so right now, this guy was not really bothered by it. But now going back to Saitama, we finally have him, coming out from the ship. I'm not sure why he just didn't jump off, because he was on the surface of it. But regardless, now he's out, and we have Tornado questioning him at first. And so right now, Genesis had came in, like both of them were like ignoring her, and so that right there had like kind of like set her off. But then we see that while she was like bad mouthing Saitama, we have Genesis saying, spoil your brat, watch your mouth, be like Jenna said something like, watch your mouth, you spoil your bread before you get smacked down. It was like something like that, but out of nowhere, all we see now is just Genesis go flying because Tornado used the powers on him. And so right now, she got mad mainly because Genesis here had like called her a spoiled brat, and we learn now that Tornado, she's actually older than him. So I do wonder just how old she is, because I don't think that right there was like clarified, in the anime. But right before she could attack Saitama, Bang here had to come and remind her that she is a hero and she cannot just go around and doing this. And so she got all mad and left. And so right now, where we have Saitama trying to help Genesis, get out of the rock because his limbs were all turning like the wrong directions, he actually pulled off his arm, and that right there had me laughing my ass off. And so that right there was like pretty much where the episode ended. We did get an update how, Metal Knight took the alien tech and used it for his own things. He actually made the Hero Association building, into like into this fortress of steel that, nothing could like really get through. We see now that like City A was like pretty much made into the Heroes headquarters, and we see now that they had all these roads leading to like the different cities, so that way heroes could get there faster. And we even see now that like there was a special building for A rank and above, obviously, and they can now live there at the Hero Association. But at the same time, that right there, it's kind of messed up, because what about C rank and B ranks? They are still looked down upon, while A ranks are getting like all the perks. Now I get that A ranks are definitely above the rest, but obviously some B ranks can be amazing, like Saitama. And after this guy better be A rank. That right there wasn't clarified, but he should definitely be A rank after bringing down Boros by himself. And so now we see that like after the credits, and this time we did get a new any theme. We see now that like things really haven't changed much, where we once again have where we have a huge monster, going around causing trouble. And we see that, this time it was Putin, king of the underworld, but he took the form of like a pig for some reason. And so we see this guy definitely, laid waste to like one of these cities. And so right now, where we have him getting ready to crush a building where a child was, we have Genesis, saving that boy. And that right there was awesome, because Genesis definitely got some speed to him. And so right now we have Putin, like who do we have here? And Genesis was like a guy who's a hero for fun and profit. And so obviously he was not talking about himself, but Saitama, and we see him come flying in there, and with one punch, Putin is now gone. And so Genesis was like, and his disciple. And so right now, we have Saitama, who is definitely angry because once again he ended the battle, in one punch. But overall, this series has been great. This finale was like definitely amazing. Now because of that, I would definitely give it a 9. But series overall, series overall, I'm giving this a fantastic rating, hands down, because One Punch Man is definitely great. Now, it definitely can be a little overhyped. Like if people say this right here is like the best anime ever, I guess that right there can be getting into the overhyped zone. But if like people are saying that this right here is one of the best anime of 2015, then I will definitely agree. Overall, One Punch Man is fantastic. I will definitely recommend it to anyone, because overall I'm giving the series not a just the finale, but the series as well, a 9 rating, because to me it definitely earned that. You know, I will definitely go back and rewatch this at, you know, at some point, and also I will definitely catch up in the manga as well, because I did start reading that. But as always, let me know what you guys thought. Don't forget to like and subscribe, because it really helps me out. But as always, you guys take it easy, and I'll see you all next time.